Welcome to another edition of Dr. Benson and Mister Heid, the show of all manner of ephemera.
And remember, everything is off topic at the end of the day.
I am Jonathan Heid.
I am Andy Benson.
And today's topic is underrated musical artists.
Now, we have a topic we did, I think it was actually our first or our second podcast. I guess it was our second edition, where we talked about one-hit wonders and things like that. Second. This is sort of it was the second, right? This is sort of a similar region to explore. Jonathan and I are both avowed musical fans, or I guess music fans. Our interests tend to be very eclectic across the spectrum. Different genres of music, different eras, different periods of time, different people overall. I think we have a lot of shared ground, and also some areas where we're far apart, but that's what makes it interesting, I think.
I think so, too. We want to thank the Wrights Theater of Du Bois, Pennsylvania, for giving us the space to do this in. That's always nice to be here.
Certainly very cozy.
Very cozy.
It is.
And also, we might as well make mention of the benefit performance of $1 Million Quartet, which is coming up. Is it June 22nd?
Yes, Saturday, June 22nd, 7:30 p.m. The event will be held at the Du Bois Area Middle School. I believe tickets are $25.
$25, and this is based. It's a Broadway play that covers one recording session that was attended by Johnny Cash, Elvis Presley. Who was the third?
Carl Perkins, and then also Jerry Lee Lewis was there.
And
four of them.
Who was the girl?
I don't know who the girl was, to be honest. I don't know if she was somebody real or if somebody who was made up or a composite character or something for the show. That I can't answer. But
right.
the four stars are definitely Elvis, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Carl Perkins.
And of course, that's all going to be a wonderful benefit. It benefits the Wrights Theater.
I think it'll do very well, yeah.
I think it will too. So today's topic, underrated musical artists.
Right, and the question is, obviously certain musical artists become bigger than others, and arguably one could say that there are people who are just as talented or even maybe more talented, or it's all, subjective, or a matter of opinion, but why, there's certain musical artists that we find that they don't quite get as big as others. And that's an interesting question to probe. Why is that, I guess? We each have a few preferred musical artists that we think maybe never quite got their due or never quite...
Here's the other question, too. For somebody that might really, really be into the artists that we're going to discuss, maybe it's not so much a matter that they are underrated, but it also could be the fact that some of these artists were not part of the mainstream, especially given Andy's and my location. Because growing up, you kind of had to, if you developed any side interests in music, what we had was pretty much middle of the road, top 40 pop. There was never an emphasis on rhythm and blues being played on local radio stations or alternative types of I don't know what I'm saying here.
No, that's true, but nowadays there's of course wider access to a lot of those things, but in some ways that there still isn't around here. There's even people who are regionally famous who we we can't really even, that's a whole other subject to delve into, but I mean, if you grow up in certain parts of California, you're going to be subject to a little bit different, or I guess a more wider encompassing range of music, just like you would if you were in New York City or somewhere on the East Coast, but they also don't have the same path either. They have some shared ground, but not, there's something exclusive for each. I guess around here, you're right, we have to go off of whatever was funneled through to top 40.
Yeah.
That's what you have to go off of.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people could probably say that.
And just for an example, I remember I didn't necessarily think that she was going to be part of the list, but I guess I could include her as Sade.
I don't even know who that is.
Yes, you do.
Do I?
Yes. She...
have you actually stumped me?
What was her song in about 1985, 1986? Oh nuts. It'll come to me. But I remember we did this thing when I did board op at the radio station WOWQ, right when compact discs were just being touted as just so wonderful and becoming commercially available because of their sound quality and the clarity. Her CD is one of the ones that we featured in rotation, and what would happen is we would play one track off of each of those CDs for that particular segment. It was, I don't know what it was, but it was sponsored by local businesses. And so I remember at the time her thinking, boy, she's really different. This is a different sound. This is a different This was really interesting. So I think she was kind of underrated. I feel stupid that I can't remember her song.
I can't even cover for that. I don't even know what it is.
She had well one of the favorite songs on the CD. I can't remember the name of that one either. Boy, we're gonna sound really good. Anyway, there are people in the audience who know who Sade is.
Nevertheless,
I'm sounding really dumb. Anyway, she's a wonderful, and I think to some degree she's kind of. Oh, you said that.
I'm racking my brain. That's why I keep saying it. I'm trying to. I'm
Smooth Operator was her one song called Smooth Operator.
I don't know.
All right, so that was just kind of an example to get the ball rolling.
Right. So who was your first? You had mentioned a couple.
The first one that I was thinking of was actually Ricky Lee Jones. Mm-hmm. Chucky's in Love. That was a major hit for her.
So to start off, we have someone here who has a hit song. I think maybe even a number one. It was somewhere high up there, yeah.
Yeah, this was in 1970. Yeah, 40 years ago, 1979 was when Chucky's in Love came out.
So again, like a lot of one-hit wonders, she comes out of the gate with that, and you think, okay, now where do we go from here?
I think she developed kind of a particular niche audience, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But I remember back in 1979 thinking that her music was really kind of alternative, even though I don't think that word existed back then as a descriptive of musical styles. But she would definitely be one on my list.
Well, and see, nowadays, just to have a segue here, I guess back at that point, yeah, in the late 70s, early 80s, the word alternative, or the whole idea of a genre that was alternative, had its purpose, I guess. Now, I mean, almost anything can be labeled alternative. I don't even know if that genre packs a punch anymore.
I don't
know.
It
would have at one time. I mean, but once you fill that up, you go through the 90s, there's all kinds of alternative rock. There's all kinds of you have these offshoots of rock and roll or blues rock influenced music like grunge and garage rock and things like that. And that gets thrown into alternative, and then you move forward and you say, okay, well, nowadays almost anything can be said, well, that's sort of alternative. Well, I don't know, is it? So yeah, you're right. At that point, that would have been very much a new exclusive type of idea that people could embrace, like, oh, this is something different.
Here's another thought about 1979, is I was just sitting here thinking that musically, that year really ushered in a bunch of changes, because prior to that, disco was really kind of the rage for about 15, 16, 24 months, something like that.
But disco is ending, kind of at this point, or slowing down, I guess?
It was slowing down. It wasn't ending, because there were disco songs that were still prevalent right through, I want to say 82. But other song types other musical types that were coming in included punk rock. You had
new wave and punk rock coming in.
New wave. You had people like Ricky Lee Jones. You have
the second British invasion, as they call it, coming in of all these different,
Right, that's right.
Right. It was a cross between like your glam rock interests and your punk rock interests coming together. A lot of it coming from across the water, influencing American mainstream music, I guess.
And it just progressed right through the 1980s.
What else can we say about Ricky Lee Jones? I don't know. I mean, there's more music to her, but that's the only song I can recall.
The album that it came from is wonderful. She has another song on that album that it wasn't released, I don't think, as a single, but it's called Company, and it's a slowed down kind of mournful version about either missing somebody who has just moved away and gone, or perhaps somebody that passed away. It's a song of wistful kind of longing, and just beautiful. I can't listen to it that often because it kind of makes me cry, but but it's a good song.
Powerful music for sure.
I remember seeing Ricky Lee Jones on a Grammy show probably about 1980, and I didn't even know what it was then to be high, but she was definitely high. And
that's the image I got from even just listening to the way that her music kind of swooned over you. Like it was a very much a smoky, bluesy type of like chilled out,
weeded,
easy listening. But
is that the word? Weeded?
I don't know. I guess you could call it that. I get what you're saying. Like for sure. Like I can just going over the song in my head. I get that image.
Doing some sort of smoking the grass.
Yeah. As it were.
Up on these terms.
Well, I can tell you one of my, the mid-70s we're talking, and this woman has passed away since. I think she passed away somewhere in the last 10 years or so. Very, very remarkable vocalist was Phoebe Snow. and some people may know who that was.
She had one hit, or did
well, she's not played much on the radio. I will say that first of all. No matter what the station is, you're not what the format is. You're not going to hear a lot of it. I'm not really sure why, because arguably, and this is one of these things where she never became super huge, but some of her contemporaries were people like your Carole Kings and your Linda Ronstadts and your Carly Simon, people like that. They all were female vocalist songwriters with strong voices, very unique, distinct styles, but they all, you knew that when it came to vocal caliber, you could count on them. Phoebe Snow is one of the ones that, like, all of those other women would say, like, oh, she was the best. Like, they would were to her, like, she was the one who had, her range was more expressive. I think, I'm not going to sound musically competent here, but she had the biggest range as far as I think it was contralto. That was what they called her voice. That was where she fit into that category.
Okay.
And the octaves that she could cover were up, down, up, down. Are
you thinking of Phoebe Snow, or are you thinking of Minnie Riperton?
I'm thinking of Phoebe Snow. I do know who Minnie Riperton was, but
I didn't realize that Phoebe Snow had that great of a range. But to anybody that's listening to this, can you name the 1975 hit for which she became famous?
Minnie Riperton?
No, Phoebe Snow. But we can't hear your answers.
I believe it was Poetry Man.
You're right.
Is that the one? And Minnie Riperton, I think, was Inside My Love, wasn't it, or something like that?
Loving You.
Okay,
is easy.
I was close.
Because you're beautiful.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not even going to try.
Okay.
But Phoebe Snow is a vocalist that I've listened to a lot, and again, I always wondered, if you assembled people to name the best female vocalists and as far as like storytellers as well of the 1970s, some of those names I brought up you would hear: Carole King, Carly Simon, Linda Ronstadt,
yes.
The list goes on and on.
Barbara Streisand,
Roberta Flack,
too.
People like that, Barbara Streisand. But Phoebe Snow often is forgotten. I'm not really sure why. I think what I want to say, I don't know if she was as prolific as some of the other ones. I think she released records more intermittently. But I always thought it was interesting whenever someone in that group of contemporaries or peers, when they all say, like, she's the one that you don't want to forget about. Like, we're all more famous. Yeah, you know more about us. But, like, don't forget about Phoebe Snow. That was the attitude they had. Like, in numerous interviews, people like Linda Ronstadt, who I think was a close friend of hers, even upon her death, said, like, Phoebe was the one that, she was the A-lister here. Like, she was the one who never quite got her due. And I always thought that was interesting. She was successful, don't get me wrong. Like, she definitely was, made a name for herself. But I don't think that she had, I'm going to sound vain here and shallow, but I don't think as far as physical appearance, she may have had the same allure as... Well, she wasn't.
Talk about politically correct.
Wasn't. No, it wasn't that. It was the fact that I don't know if she tried to be more.
Were you an attorney in a previous life?
No, I don't think so. Here's what I'm trying to say. If you look up the way that some of these women were marketed, looks took precedence over talent.
And
sometimes.
I think you're right.
Whereas Phoebe Snow had the talent. There's no question about it. I don't know if it was that she didn't want to play into these people's hands and change her appearance, or if it was that she just didn't care. But when people think about Carly Simon, they think about physical appearance.
Well, Carly Simon wasn't. I mean, she had, for heaven's sake, if she passed out, don't stub your foot on her teeth. I mean,
that's true.
So I know what you're saying about this, but yeah, I don't know if Phoebe Snow was necessarily if she was.
I'm not denigrating her appearance. I'm just saying that I don't think as much emphasis was put on her appearance as it was other people. Even Barbara Streisand, they would manipulate the way that she looked as far as makeup and costumes and hair.
Oh yeah.
And that was
the Streisand.
I don't think that Phoebe Snow was a sex symbol.
No,
if that's accurate to say.
Janice
other ones could have been, and there you go. Yeah, there's several. I'm not saying that they weren't beautiful. I'm just saying that they weren't played up as such.
Right.
For whatever reason.
Right.
Which, to a point, is unfair, I think.
And by the way, of course, you realize that Maya Rudolph is the daughter of Minnie Riperton.
Yes.
I think that's fascinating because
it is fascinating, yes.
Because Maya Rudolph turned out to be the actor comedian, whereas her famous mother was the singer, and I love Maya Rudolph. Anyway,
she is funny.
I didn't mean to look a squirrel.
That's all right.
ADHD.
But yeah, that's my thing about Phoebe Snow. She was just as good, if not better, than a lot of her contemporaries, but never quite eclipsed the way that she probably should have. And I have to imagine it was some sort of for whatever reason, she just didn't fit.
Poetry
the
Man is a
profile, I
beautiful
guess.
song, I must say, also.
Well, it is a good song. And one
I'm
of my
not familiar
favorites-
with her other work.
There's a song called Harpo's Blues, which it appeared in certain television shows here and there, and people would use it. And it's very much it's a good expression of her range. It's a good example of her style overall. It's not much different from Poetry Man in a way, but these songs are not exactly sexy. They're realistic and somewhat sad, actually. They're solemn, I think would be a good word, but they're very evocative as far as imagery, and they can take you to the story that these songs tell there's a lot of rich material there, I think, that you can transport people to other places.
Right.
So there is some magic there in that regard. But I always thought that Phoebe Snow was just, there's no question that she has the talent, that she was just as good or not, if not better than other people at the same time, but she never quite achieved that level of fame, and I always thought that was interesting.
I know that Poetry Man sounded very kind of mystical with its use of guitar and other strings to give it kind of just that whole...
There was much more class involved in her, and much more texture to her compositions of music.
Yes.
There was more... A lot of her songs are very jazzy in the fact that there's a horn section, there's strings, there's this and that, as opposed to some of her contemporaries didn't quite go that far with musical complexity. It was more mainstream. But I think that Phoebe Snow is vastly underrated, personally. You had another one that you...
Well, my other one is, and again, I don't know if it's a matter that she is underrated, but she's just of a different genre than what Andy and I grew up with. So in other maybe metropolitan areas, she's revered. Well, as a matter of fact, I know that that's the case. Nancy Wilson, not to be confused of the Wilson sisters, but Nancy Wilson was an African-American rhythm and blues jazz artist who sang standards. She also sang some torch songs here and there. She did cover versions of other popular artists' material. She was born in 1937 and passed away, I think, last year in 2018. She was 81. She just such a smooth voice and capable of singing so many wonderful different types of songs, and she could just put so much emotion and timing and phrasing, just very unique.
Very nuanced performer, I guess.
I think that's safe to say.
And see, I've never actually, I'm not sure that I've heard of this woman. So again, there's the very fact that, obviously you've heard of Phoebe Snow, but the very fact that you brought up two artists that I knew Ricky Lee Jones, but you brought up Nancy Wilson and also the other one that we couldn't remember. Yes. See, I forgot already.
Her song was Smooth Operator.
The fact that you brought those up, it just signifies that, and that I didn't know them, that just points out that when it comes to underrated performers, you can really pull almost anybody out of anywhere and stump people, hence why they're underrated.
Well, and hopefully we may spark some of your interest too, and you might want to go out and learn about some of these people.
Right, but go on about Nancy Wilson.
She was a good singer. The funny thing about it was the way I became introduced to her is... Okay, see if you can follow this. In the 80s, the singer Mary Wilson, who was one of the Supremes, came out with an autobiography talking about her experience as part of the Supremes with Diana Ross and, oh heck, who was the other original member? Somebody's gonna...
That I don't know.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I feel terrible because this...
I'll look it up. Go on.
This person was really kind of the heart of the Supremes, and she never got her due. But anyway, my ex-wife went to a yard sale and found this album, this tattered album by Nancy Wilson, and she thought that it was Mary Wilson who wrote this autobiography. And I said, no, that's Mary Wilson, but thank you for buying me the album. And that's how I got familiar with Nancy Wilson's work.
So the Supremes has Diana Ross, Mary Wilson, Florence Ballard.
It was Flo Ballard.
Flo Ballard.
It was Flo Ballard, and
Okay,
she died kind of tragically in 1976 from heart disease. She was not that old, but Flo Ballard was really kind of considered the heart of the Supremes and did not get her due. And
I didn't know that.
I'm totally. Oh yeah.
Well, again, but that's a good point. All you ever hear about is Diana Ross. Ross. Not that she doesn't deserve it to a point, but I never knew who the other two's names were.
Yeah, and that's
even today. You take a group like Destiny's Child. Beyonce is all the people know nowadays. I don't know the other two women in that group.
Or Lisa Left Eye Lopez.
Right. There's all kinds of, that's another thing where it's sort of a segue or a different sort of a slight offshoot of this, but there are groups of people where one person eclipses and the others don't.
But they don't get their due.
Maybe they should.
I
Maybe that was not
think-
fair, or you know. But that's a good point.
Well, in Diana Ross's case, I think it was just a matter of that's where the publicity machine went.
Again, yeah, I'm sure that it was easy to zero in on her and say that's she will go, and
that's where
the rest of you, we don't care.
Right.
So that's interesting too. But Nancy Wilson, I've never heard. I'll have to see that again. That's a person that I would love to learn more about and research.
Well, and yeah, please do, because she's wonderful. One of her big hits in 1964 was called "How Glad I Am." She's done, and that was another thing that kind of endeared me to her because she had a number of hits from the year that I was born. So I think she's wonderful. She put out an album when she was 60, and this was in 1997, and she still had it. I mean, she's wonderful compositions, and you'd have to go get the album. But yeah, definitely somebody worth checking out.
I guess one of my last things that I would say is that just thinking about some people who have recently passed away, as far as musicians and musical artists, some people never quite get out of, and I don't know if this is by choice or by just natural selection or whatever you want to call it, but there are people who become sidemen, they call them. Like they might release their own material, their own records, their own albums and whatnot, but they spend more time as session guys in a studio working with other bigger artists, playing on their album or something like that, contributing, or they tour with bigger people, and like they never quite break in as far as a solo artist in their own right. A famous sideman for many years was Leon Russell. I don't know if do you know who that is? You probably heard his...
Didn't he just pass?
A couple of years ago, I believe. He worked a lot with Elton John. He worked a lot, I think, with Bob Dylan in the band and
That's
people like that.
A new one for me.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of these guys who, and again, he had long hair, long gray hair, walked with a cane, had glasses and a mustache, and it was all like, looked like Chewbacca, kind of.
Oh.
But like that, that was that type of look. But Leon Russell was very much talented, and Leon Russell was, again, spent a lot of time working with others, had some hits of his own here and there, but he was much more well regarded as this guy, like a sidekick guy that you could call and say, hey, we're going on a tour, like, come with us. He was a great piano player. He was a great songwriter, very much rooted in rhythm and blues, very much rooted in like a southerny type of style. Another one is Dr. John, who just passed away a few days ago. Very popular in the New Orleans festivals and whatnot. I believe he had live albums released in the 70s that did well and things like that, but he never became... the question again is, if he was just as talented, why didn't he become an Elton John?
Was
or
he
why didn't
known
he become
for a
Billy
particular
Joel?
hit or hits?
Yes, and their names are escaping me.
Because when I found out on my Facebook feed that he passed away, I have no clue.
Well, and again, a lot of people probably
is.
said, I don't even know who he is. But is he somebody that you've heard before? Probably. You might not have known it. Hence why, like, these underrated people don't get their...
Sometimes I think I'm kind of culturally undernourished, for lack of a better term, because when we talk about great people like Phoebe Snow or Nancy Wilson, anybody that we've discussed, I feel like, there's so many more people out there that I don't know about.
Well, I could say the same, and we can't be omniscient, I suppose.
No, we can't. We can't.
They say you can be everywhere, but you can't be omniscient. I'm sure. Yeah, there are many people that we haven't even really scratched the surface. It's just the tip of the iceberg, naming a few people. But I think we could all say that we're somewhat undernourished or malnourished, I guess, with some of these things. I like that, undernourished.
Musically malnourished.
But just say undernourished, as far as opposed to being overnourished.
Well, I think some people are musically malnourished, but
I think a lot of people are. I'll go further than that. Yeah, I think many. I think most people are, to be honest, and even we could be to a point where at least we're making an effort not to be. But
right.
A lot of people don't even make the effort not to be. But I will say that, and you can, I'm sure you can relate a bit. Like these days, there's so much easy access to a wealth of knowledge and music that didn't always exist.
That's one of my...
So now people are getting, even people my age are getting, and people any age really, are getting to have a wider access to a lot more music that they might not have had before.
Part of modern technology is the fact that this information is at your fingertips. If you want to explore something,
right,
you can just do...
From your pocket, you can take out a phone and you can find any obscure song or group or anything that you want and listen to your heart's desire. I mean, you can listen to it for hours, as opposed to having to go search for a record,
So
find it, and then buy it, and
that's
do
right.
that.
For as stuck as I am in the past, it's only today's modern technology that allows me to be there.
Well,
That's
but
really kind of
that's an interesting point, actually, that it allows you to keep that going. It's sort of ironic, I guess, isn't it?
It really is.
I never really thought about that. That's a very good point. The fact that modern technology can keep you stuck in the past. That might not be the best way to say it, but that's an interesting point.
It is kind of true.
Modern technology allows anybody, not just you, anybody to live, to revisit the past, I guess. That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
Not only does it allow you to move forward, but it allows you to go back. That's deep.
It really is.
And that was inadvertent too, wasn't it? That
was
wasn't even. That was like accidental.
It just proves that at the end of the day, it's all off topic.
Exactly.
I mean,
that's perfect. Seriously, that was perfect.
And very.
What other
true.
validation do we need?
That's right. That's right. So I can't think. This is another one of those things where if we sat and thought about it, we could add so many more people.
Right.
To the
We knew we
list.
could come up with a couple. Which we did. Like, I only came up with one, so you did better than I did.
You came up with more than one.
Well, but Phoebe Snow was the one that I really wanted to focus on because I was so impressed with her ability as a singer that I never understood why a lot of people I would talk to didn't know who she was.
I would agree with that.
If I brought up her contemporaries, they would say, "Oh yeah, we know them, of course."
If for no other reason,
Right.
they should have known her one-hit wonder.
You would think.
Well, actually, I can't say that because I don't know if she was.
But people, she wasn't quite a one-hit wonder, but she didn't achieve the level of success that many of her contemporaries did.
Oh, that's right. You said she had that second song. It was
There was several, and the
Okay.
one I mentioned was just some album track that
Well, see, that's
enjoyed,
something
but
that I need to learn more about her, and I'm glad that you brought that up.
I think
'cause
you'd
I will
be impressed. I don't think you'd dislike it. I think
Oh
you'd be
no,
okay with it.
I love poetry, man.
And again, Nancy Wilson is somebody I would love to research about. So that's something that even today we can touch on modern music briefly. We know how many people are ephemeral as far as flashes in the pan. I mean, if you look at the list of number one songs of the last few years, you're going to see mainstays like Adele and Bruno Mars and
Bruno Mars
go
at
on
the
and
age
on.
of 65 in Las Vegas talking about how he ain't going to do nothing today, or whatever that song is.
That's probably what's going to happen. The Lazy Song, and that's
And
probably what's
letting it
gonna
all
happen.
hang out.
Yeah, why not? But I mean, even you can go through even slightly more.
But I love Bruno Mars.
Post Malone,
somebody-
Halsey, and people like this who are getting these great songs.
Yes.
And this is just a small percentage, but those people are here and there, and they're staying around. But you also have these one-hit wonders. You have these groups or these artists who are there and then gone. And is it because they're genuinely talented and underrated and they're just not breaking through in the right way? Is it not the right time? Are they not good enough? Like, what does it come down to?
And then the flip side of the coin is, for example, somebody who should be a flash in the pan, but unfortunately isn't. We're not saying any names. Justin Bieber!
I would agree, yeah. He needs to go away. So I'm
does.
sorry.
I didn't mean to.
No, that's all right. We could probably trash on several people if we thought about it long enough.
Yes, and I don't want to be that trash
I know.
person. I don't want to be that.
But I mean, and again,
this is a positive podcast.
Another thing is that maybe we won't be able to know much about who's underrated and who isn't until enough time has passed. Is that accurate? Can we say that now as they're still current, or do we have to wait 20 more years before we say,
that's another
remember that one
deep thought.
Yeah, I don't know if there's an answer to that or not.
I
Because here we're talking about people from the past. It's easy to say in hindsight, oh, well, I can't believe Phoebe Snow or Nancy Wilson
hindsight
didn't
is
get more
always
attention.
20/20. I don't know who that could even. I don't even know who we could conjecture upon that might apply to in the future in terms of current performance.
I can give a few people in personal preference I think are underrated, but they could easily come out next year with something else and elevate themselves to okay. Well, they're now they're getting their due. One more thing I'll say is that an artist like Beck. Do you know who that is?
I have heard the name.
This is a guy who was around in the early 90s.
Sorry to say,
That's
I don't.
Okay. This is a guy who was around in the early 90s, sort of an alternative
Name one
scene.
of his songs.
Loser is one that was a big one.
Name another one of his songs.
I'm drawing a blank.
Okay, I'll look him
I'm
up.
drawing a blank, but there's enough. This is the guy who, in recent times, this is an interesting story, though. This is a guy who's been around since the early 90s, maybe even earlier, but that was when the big song of his early days, Loser, came out. It was the year I was born, 1993. He be somewhat appropriate, but the
come on.
somewhat maybe, but the he goes along up until the present day. He's still active. I don't know how prolific exactly he was, but he hung around. He hung in there. And I think it was 2014 or somewhere in there, he won Album of the Year at the Grammys. I can't remember what the album was called. I don't remember any. I can't even immediately recall songs from it, but I remember listening to it. It generated a lot of attention because he was the guy, and I'm not going to get this exactly right, but he was the guy who won the award, and I believe Kanye West interrupted the speech. Or something. It was something like that. I don't know if either he interrupted his speech or maybe he wasn't even there to get the award at the time. But like Kanye West said, "Oh, so and so should have won. Beyonce should have won, or whatever it was," and that was, I thought, was quite asinine.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, anybody can say, "Oh, we don't like Beck. We don't think he should have won," but to go up there like that and do that, that's different. And he generated a lot of attention because people said, like, "Hey, this guy's been around for a long time. He's been plugging away, and now he's getting some attention." So maybe for a while he was underrated in some people's eyes and then got more attention.
But people eventually...
I don't know what he's doing now, but I mean, this is a guy who hung around, who he wasn't just some flash in the pan. He hung around and finally broke through in that regard.
He persevered, yes.
Right, so that was something that I always thought was interesting as far as being underrated or overrated. I think Kanye West is highly overrated, personally. And I thought that was an incredible display of arrogance to on national television to say, "Oh, he shouldn't have won. So and so should have won." Even if people think that, like,
not a shining moment.
No,
in his
no.
career.
So that was something.
I don't hate to say this. I hate to say this, and I don't hate to say this. But another person that I feel is terribly overrated is Madonna.
I can sort of get on board with that. I don't mind a lot of her stuff. I really don't. But some of it I get tired of hearing.
Yeah. And
the whole image, I know. But this is sort of it's the other side of the coin. We talked about underrated people. We can talk a little bit about overrated.
Yeah, I guess
the other side of it. We can hit that part of it a little bit.
Overrated people. Maybe, and that's certainly.
That could go on and on and on. To be honest, I think I have more overrated than I do underrated. To be honest, but that's the thing about music. Even a band that you enjoy. Here's an interesting thing. Even a group or an artist that you enjoy, somebody who has hit after hit after hit, very popular. Even some of those most famous songs, don't you get tired of hearing after a while?
Just an example, I love Barbra Streisand, always have for about the last 30, 35 years, but there are some of her songs that I just say, please do not play that song.
There are songs...
Crying out loud.
Right, there are songs of certain bands that I'll hear on the radio and I'll turn it to another station.
Do not play People Who Need People. That just turns my stomach. Great song, wonderful song, no doubt about it. Not one of my favorites.
Over the last several years, I've always been a fan of the group Journey. I think they have a lot of good songs.
But
when I hear Don't Stop Believing on the radio, or in a bar, or at a stadium, or at a store, or in an elevator, whatever it is, I turn it off.
Yeah.
Because there was a time when I enjoyed that song. I really did. But again, I could go on and on. There are Bon Jovi songs that I have to turn off because
for sure.
I'm not saying he's not good. I'm just saying that there's Bruce Springsteen songs, there's Mellencamp songs, there are Led Zeppelin songs, AC/DC. Like there's all kinds of mostly rock. I'll stick to that hard rock stuff, classic rock that I've heard. They're all greatest hits compilations. I've heard them so many times that after a while I just say stop.
What was the Mellencamp song that you turn your car on and it's give me the bone me harder than a bone? What's the name of this song?
I'm not thinking of George Thorogood, are you?
No.
Out of the Bone? I hate that song. Sorry, George Thorogood, but I hate that song.
Oh, Hurt So Good.
Hurt So Good, yes.
Sink your teeth right through my bone, baby.
See what we can do. That's right, yeah. Again, that's and all these songs get a lot of airplay. That's just the way it is. I get that. But still, there are some more than others, whether they're classic rock, older songs, modern, whatever it is, that you hear everywhere.
Yes.
Even some of my favorite artists, even beautiful songs that are slower songs that people have written, ballady type things. There are times whenever I say, I cannot hear this today.
My heart will go on.
That's something else, the Titanic whole phenomenon. I mean, after a while, people said the ship sank, that's it.
Try sitting through that movie twice when it came out.
Why did you have to do that?
My ex enjoyed it and wanted to see it twice.
Well, I mean,
So I sat through that twice. What does that amount to? 7 hours?
about, yeah.
And
It was over 3 hours.
the human butt was not meant for sitting that long in a movie theater. I'm here to tell you.
Was it intermission?
No,
There was no intermission?
no,
I didn't know.
I don't think so.
I guess they don't really do that anymore, but I was just curious. So we've touched upon some overrated people as well.
Yeah, I look.
Our overrated list is probably much more extensive than our underrated
Definitely
list, for sure.
topics that we could consider for the future as a
Yeah.
part 2 for both underrated
And again, it's all
overrated.
subjective. Anybody could say, "Oh, anybody is overrated." Anybody can be overrated or underrated.
Yes, so
depending on who
anything
you
that we
ask.
might have said during this particular podcast, we hope that you don't take too much umbrage with our opinions or choices, but hey,
I agree.
we tell it like it is.
No angry letters, please.
No, well, we got to develop a little bit more of an audience for that to happen.
That's the best. That's actually an advantage. They can't really.
That's
write
right,
to
but you
us.
never know how this might go, Andy. You
That's
never
true.
know.
I'm enjoying it.
But thank you for participating in this topic. In the future, we will be discussing favorite theater memories of the Wrights Theater. And we're going to work it out so that we can be joined by our friend and theater colleague, Val Kaczynski, who is a wonderful actress who...
Yeah, she's okay.
She's all right. Yeah, she'll do.
That'll be fun. We're gonna have a love letter to the Wrights.
A
Theater.
love letter to the
Memories,
Wrights Theater.
yes.
That is going to be the topic. We know that a lot of you will be able to relate to that, and we're going to have a lot of fun with that. So do stay tuned for that.
That'll be number 5, I believe, right?
That will be number 5, our 5th
so,
podcast. So thank you for joining us in this one. Remember, at the end of the day,
Everything is off topic.
have a great week.
So long.
Bye.
Goodbye. Farewell.